Good evening and welcome to Healing of the Heart podcast. I am Keisha Henry and I am your host. Welcome to episode number 15. I can't believe I'm saying that, but it is episode number 15. It's 7 p.m. on this beautiful May 19th. Is it May 19th? Did I get that right? Nope, it's May 20th. Oh my gosh, I'm a day behind. May 20th. I'm so sorry. But welcome to episode number 15 on Healing of the Heart podcast. A beautiful Saturday evening. I'm looking outside my window. I should take a picture. It's so beautiful. It's breathtaking, actually. Although today was hot, but it was still a beautiful day. And I hope you're enjoying this ambient music in the background. I'm changing the pace a little bit this time. I normally have something crazy going, but I figure we would just kind of ease right into our podcast this evening. The topic is, I Can't Take One More Thing. I think so. This entry music, I think, is quite soothing to the topic. And have a little bit of a change in terms of how we kind of roll through our podcast. We're going to do a few things differently up front. This is one of them. So I'm going to just kind of pause here a little bit and kind of allow other persons to join in and give you a chance to enjoy this music. So maybe get your cup of tea. I'm going to go kind of grab mine too. I'm a little bit behind grabbing my tea, but I'm going to do that real quick here. In about 5 minutes, I'll be back. So enjoy the music. So you can pause for a little bit. Maybe you can get your tea or whatever you decide to kind of cozy up with on this Saturday evening. And again, just giving other persons a chance to kind of pop into this episode number 15, this podcast. I'm so happy to be with you. I look forward to the podcast episodes. I'm really having, a good time. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but really enjoying this community a lot. We'll talk some more about that. Getting a lot of feedback about this podcast, and I want to make it relatable to you in terms of what it means for me, but also, making space to include your feedback and your thoughts about this podcast. So I'm going to pause and let this music continue while I grab my tea and while you grab yours. See you back in a little bit. All right, I'm back. Did you get your tea? I hope so. Let me crank this music down a whole lot now. It's now 7:06, right about the time that we usually kind of crank up our Healing of the Heart podcast. I'm so excited. I have my cup of what's this? Bigelow lemon ginger plus probiotics. I'm old. I need probiotics, y'all. I have to have that. If you're over 40, you need collagen and you need probiotics. Oh yeah, you better have it. Those joints, start to squeak and you need a little bit of push. I'm going to be honest. And if you're out there like me, you're over 40, I'm speaking the truth. So anyway, again, welcome to Healing of the Heart podcast. I am Keisha Henry, licensed clinical social worker, psychotherapist, mom, wife, and author. I'm so excited about that part too. We'll talk a little bit more about what's going on with Healing of the Heart, the book, and we'll catch up on that. If you're new joining us for the first time, by now you probably, read a little bit about, where Healing of the Heart podcast came from. It came from Healing of the Heart book, Lessons from My Journey. And, it's just how can I say the truth about, my life and how my life really, my experiences really have played a big part, big role in the work that I now do and have been doing for the past 17 plus years. And now comes this book and this podcast. So learn more about that. You can just go to the website. By now, most persons know that it's nbhi.lsc.org. You can learn a little bit more about me there, or healingoftheheart.co. You can learn more, details about that. What else? Yeah, I'm trying to kind of trim that down in the beginning of the podcast so I can have more time, so we can have more talk time. So if you're new joining the podcast for the first time, you want to learn more about that, then you can check out those websites and you can learn more about it there. So what is this podcast not? I love to do that part. So I do disclosures and it's important to do that. Like I always say, if you're listening and you're used to listening to this podcast, skip this part. You know what to do. But I have to be careful because I know that there are people listening for the first time. And, I really have to make sure that we create a safe space every time we do a podcast. It's that critical, right? Because my code of ethics still extend not only is in the office or in groups of wherever I work, but also on this podcast, I'm still responsible. And that's part of my duties, So I'm kind of like always on duty with that. That's the truth. You know what I mean? A doctor's never off duty. Come on now. So I'm still on duty and got to make sure that there is, a culture of care while I'm working, this podcast is important. So what this podcast is not, it's not a place where, we point fingers at people, where we're very judgmental about ourselves or about others. It's not a place where we sit here and not, leave space to question or ask things. But it is that space where we do the reverse of those things, as I just mentioned. Because to judge, it is self-harm. It's harming yourself emotionally. It's harming yourself psychologically. And it really harms, the things that are happening in your life further, affects your relationships, affects, your actions. And so this podcast does not want to perpetuate any of those things, but we seek to, create a space where people can, begin to ask questions and become curious about what it is that they're feeling and what their experiences have been, even up until today. Why? Because our goal in this podcast is to help persons better understand themselves, question those things about themselves, with compassion, with loving kindness. And so creating space then to be able to do that. And so we can move forward in our lives and have, productivity and become that better self. When I sign the books, matter of fact, I signed a few today and I mailed out some today. Well, I do sign it like, this is what I say, celebrating your better self, because that's what the goal is in life, is to become better, a better version of ourselves than we were yesterday. And so that's what this podcast seeks to do. So again, it's not about pointing fingers. In fact, one of the poems in the book, Blame is Not Healing, I get a lot of feedback about that one. Blaming is not healing, because if you keep pointing fingers at other persons, even though they have wronged you, that's where you're going to find your energy remain. It's so funny. Side note on that, just to reinforce that point about what this podcast is not. So let's just ground the conversation. I remember speaking one day this week to someone while I was working. I think I was working with a gentleman. It's interesting. Been getting quite a few more men, and I'm really pleased to say that. But I remember we're talking about, something related to anxiety. And I used myself as a professional use of self. And I said, you know what? I was remember that when I first started learning how to swim, that was 8 years ago. My teacher, Sharon Powers, she said, "Hey, if you keep looking down the bottom of the pool." Now I remember this. I had a traumatic incident when I was about 6 or 7. I was thrown in water and I was thrashing around and I felt like I was drowning, and it was just a part of my memory that I had to work through. And so I stayed away from the water. But when I was learning how to swim, she said, "Hey, you know what? If you're going to keep your focus on the bottom of the pool, if you're going to keep pointing down there," she says, "guess what? That's exactly where you're going to end up." I said, "Wow, that," and instantly when she was teaching me, I said, "How relatable is that?" Because truly, wherever you put your focus, wherever you put your energy, wherever you keep pointing, 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 that's all you're ever going to get. So I use this to underscore that this podcast is not about blaming, you know, um, myself included, me first. And I always say when I'm teaching, I always say, hey, this goes for me first. I can't teach what I don't practice. So I'm not really sure why I'm spending so much time here, but I sense the need to do it. I'm not sure who's listening, but it's okay to take a look at, persons who have wronged us. But it's so much more important to really work through those emotions and pivot from there. And the topics that we talk about on this podcast, right, it can be triggering. So that's the next thing we're going to move right into. So it can be, because we understand that we do this every day. In my humanity, rather, as a human phenomenon, I'm not exempt from being triggered or being bothered. But then we have to, acknowledge that that is a possibility. So then how do we work with that? That's the next thing, right? So the next thing is safety. Is that on this podcast, it may bring up tough emotions for you. It may. Matter of fact, got feedback on 2 weeks ago, the podcast, women with tears, women oppressing women. That was a very controversial podcast. And I did get feedback on it. A- And I was told that, it was such a needed one. And it was tough for me to do that podcast, but I know it was necessary. What am I saying? So, emotions, tough and difficult emotions will arise when we talk about things on this podcast. So that's why it's important to go over what this podcast is not, but what it is. So safety is a big part of what we do. And so if anything begins to feel a little bit heavy, we always say, step back from it. We talk about our pause, putting a pause in between what it is that's happening and perhaps, how you may respond to that. And so before, if this things are beginning to get heavy, right? Turn off the podcast, do something else that's distracting. Maybe when you listen to certain, topics, you might want to have some company or support. So we encourage that if you listen to this podcast at any given time. And, hey, if the live podcast right now is a bit much as we, go through, turn it off. You can always go back and play it. I say it every time. You can listen to it in increments. We have a lot of fun on here too, though. So just, beware. We do laugh and have a good time. So we have a range of, emotions that we'll experience on this podcast. So what this podcast is about safety also. So not blaming, not pointing fingers, because we don't want to stay there. We want to go slow and work through whatever it is so we can become our better selves. What else? So, right, creating a safe space is really important. And we always say too, as the podcast, ends, any episode that you listen to, we're always encouraging persons to, seek professional support and help. That professional help may be, a mental health professional. It may be somebody from your, spiritual community. I consider that to be professional. It is. It's a discipline. It's a faculty. It's training. And so therefore, I always encourage persons to, seek outside help, because again, this podcast is to, bring you into a space that you can get help that you need, and encourage you to expand out also to get the help that you need. So want to cover that, right? And then I usually just kind of take a pause right here because that was a whole lot. But just what do I want you to expect after we come back in about a minute or two? We take a lot of pauses. I wouldn't say a lot, but we take pauses. And this is no different in when I'm working. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with my style by now. When I'm working, I take pauses. And I do that as a way of allowing you and myself, right, to check in. Because when we're working, our emotions can become overwhelming. It can, be heavy. And this is just a good way for always just to check in and pause to see how or what we're feeling and to see how we want to continue. So I'm going to do the same thing now. And then when we get back, we're going to do something a little bit different just to help us to, go into the topic. We're going to do a few rounds of breath work, and, we'll talk more about that. So why don't we just pause? I'll crank. This is this ambient music, and it's on Calm, my app Calm, just in case you're wondering the source of the music. So let's take about maybe a minute or two here and kind of ground ourselves, right? Get ready for this next, this next thing that we're about to do, the next phase, which is the breath work. We're doing a little bit different tonight. I think it's necessary. So let's pause there for about a minute here or two, and then we just kind of come back to that. I promise we're going to crank up the music soon. I promise. I know some of you are probably saying, we're not used to that music. But it's a little different. We're going to kind of calm things down a little bit in the beginning because we kind of need to have a calm mind with this topic. I mean, this topic is right. I can't say one more thing. That's, signaling distress. So speaking of distress, one of the ways to, ground ourselves and to become back in touch, with our breath, the mind, and the body, is breath work. And we teach a lot on that in the work. We practice it ourselves as clinicians. I'm saying, I say myself, being the team, Jessica and Stephanie, I don't know if they're listening this evening, but we really, teach about that, right? Because the nervous system is all over the place and we just can't be bugging out. We need to be able to live, normal lives. And so breath work is really important. It's part of the stress tolerance, learning how to calm the breath and, learning how to handle the stresses, but learn the way how we handle it is really important. And so I'm going to transition from this nice ambient music now over to some this video, and I've been using this video a lot lately because what I'm finding is that, especially I've been working with a few new clients, and again I mentioned earlier some men, a few men, and I'm really loving that men are more, and these are men of color too, and they're really seeking more mental health support. That's going to be really key as we move throughout, the 21st century, honestly. And so I've been really using this breathwork video because what I'm finding then is what I want to get to is that sometimes when I try to, introduce breathwork in therapy, it can be awkward for some persons. It can be, off-putting. And so I always send them to, a reputable video or a couple of them that they can use. And I'm getting a lot of feedback on this one. So rather than teaching it to them, they prefer to watch it, practice it, and then come back. Maybe you would like the same. So I'm going to switch the music over now to the breath. So let me give you some instructions. I'm going to crank this all the way down. So box breathing is simply 5 steps. You inhale slowly through your nose for 4 to 5 second counts, right? And then you're going to hold your breath for 4 seconds. You're going to breathe out slowly for 4 seconds and then hold your breath and then repeat. Now, when I play the video, you're going to hear the sound of one inhaling and holding and exhaling. So we're going to do 4 or 5 rounds of this. And then, so we'll do it together. And then, so we'll have all of us will be on the same page with each other, feeling grounded, having a safe space so we can continue discussing the topic tonight, which is I can't take one more thing. So here we go. We're going to transition right over to that video. How are you doing this evening, guys? I hope you're doing good. I sure am. And I'm loving this podcast. Here we go. So let's remember 4 seconds breathe in through your nose, 4 seconds hold your breath, 4 seconds breathe out through your nose, and 4 seconds hold your breath. So here we go. So at a count of 1, you're going to hear the inhale. There you go. That's breathing out. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. And hold. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Hold. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Hold. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Inhale. Hold rather, sorry. Breathe in. Hold. Breathe out. Hold. Breathe in. Last time. Breathe in. Hold. And breathe out. You did it. Yay. We're going to have to give an applause for that. I don't know. What do you think about that? I thought that was very calming. Oh my goodness. So, I do this all the time and you're saying, "Yeah, we know you do." But honestly, it's really helpful throughout the day. As a matter of fact, the way how I teach it is in the morning when you rise, let that be the first thing you do instead of going on social media after you tinkle. Let that be the first thing that you do. And then, mid-morning, I was just teaching a woman this week too. Mid-morning, between 10 or 11, 11 and 12, the brain gets a little full because you've been up early already. And this is a good time to kind of, empty out and ground yourself once again. And so you can do this breath work. And before you go to bed, because this is when the mind turns over everything from the day, which is why some people say, I wake up tired. Of course you do, because the unconscious is still working. So why don't we give the unconscious a calm, right? Emptying out of the mind. And so you can actually have better rest, right? And so breath work then is important. So doing the same thing, doing this breath work that we just did a few moments ago is very helpful to, regulate your parasympathetic nervous system, your nervous system. It helps to just wind you down. It helps you to reflect, and then it helps you to sleep. And so this is a good way to ground yourself, reduce your blood pressure, reduce your stress, and so you can actually have better sleep. So I think you guys and ladies deserve another round of applause. I'm smiling over here. Let's do another one. And let me just pause here and say that I noticed that there are two persons who have joined the studio room. So that's really nice. So welcome to Healing of the Heart podcast. And so what are we talking about tonight? Well, you know what? I'm just going to be honest with you. This podcast is kind of like when the rubber hits the road, kind of podcast. Like, here's the deal. You might not get answers to some of the things that you're probably, swirling around in your head, or maybe what we're discussing. But you might get some insight, though, insight that can lead you to some answers, right? So this podcast is more or less, and most of my podcasts, topics, they're pretty structured and, I have it. Tonight, I'm not doing that so much. I'm not. I'm going to let it be a little bit more loose tonight because the topic is really, it's all encompassing really, right? Because I mean, think about it. I can't take one more thing. I mean, just pause for a second, like just reflect on your week. Did you have any kind of, I don't know, incidents or circumstances or, I don't know, transaction that you felt like, oh my gosh, I can't take one more thing? I did. I'm telling you. I mean, I did. I was like, OMG, just not one more thing, and so tonight, it's that kind of podcast. And I don't know for you, but if you're raising children, you probably had that moment this week where you said, I can't take one more thing. I don't know. Did you get that call from school or did you have that kid that didn't want to go to school? I have one. For the past month or two, she has not wanted to go to school. And I can think of a lot of reasons why she doesn't want to go. And I can think of a lot of reasons why probably your kids don't want to go to school. We're going to talk about some of that tonight. So there are a lot of things going on in our world today. I mean, I don't know if you watch the news. We have a lot of information, and that's the thing. So the information, oh my gosh, sometimes way too much information. But they're talking about, the debt ceiling, right? It's another financial vulnerability. So we have that going on, and then there's the war in Ukraine and Russia, which we're hearing so much about. So that's a lot of information there. And then there's a lot of, rah about immigration. I mean, if you're listening, to this podcast and you're affected by this, I can't imagine. I can't take one more thing. I mean, people are being deported left and right. Now, whichever side of the aisle you're on, people's lives are still affected. Okay. That's just the bottom line. This is not political for me. It's just the fact that in our humanity, these things are happening and people are affected. People's mental health and their emotional well-being is affected. People's financial abilities are being diminished significantly. And so I can't take, we can go on. And of course, we have, mass shootings everywhere. This has become the norm in this country. You have mass shootings everywhere, um, it's just the list goes on. And so I can't, so just think about all these, what I would call national things that are happening. These are national headlines. These are national issues. And then you have, day-to-day living, like I was mentioning earlier, with your kid not wanting to go to school, you're probably having a tough time at work. You're probably having health issues. I mean, I just came through having surgery, so it's like, it's just one more thing. You're probably not working with this downturn in the economy. I can't tell you, how many phone calls I have received this week from persons, seeking, mental health support. And they're saying, I can't afford that. I need it, but I cannot afford it. And, or you don't take my insurance. Oh my God. You know what I mean? So I can't take one more thing is really piling up everywhere. I mean, it's really getting ridiculous. And, then I said to myself, so what's going to be the answer? It's a good one. I don't know either. And I just know that, mental health crisis in this country is also a national headline. I didn't even mention that, but it really is. I mean, the statistics are very staggering. I'm not going to bore you with a lot of that tonight, but I do want to key in on girls, women and girls, and how girls are disproportionately affected In COVID and even post COVID, I'm not surprised. I can't take one more thing. I have to tell you too that like even in the practice, and not just with myself, but among, with Stephanie and Jessica, this statistic is true regarding girls. I mean, we're seeing an increase of, teen girls who are cutting, severe depression, and they don't want to go to school. So my daughter's among the crew that don't want to go to school and for various reasons. So I can't take one more thing. And then parents. And so here's the thing. And then I am seeing this, we're seeing this, and the statistics is showing it too that parents just don't know how to support their kids. Parents don't know how to engage with their kids. Parents just don't know. And then I wonder, wow, how did we get here? Because I mean, then I start to think about, I don't know for you listening, what was it like when you were growing up? What were your parents like? And yeah, we're not blaming, they were not perfect, we know. But what was it like growing up? I mean, did your parents know how to handle your emotions? Probably not, but I guarantee you they weren't facing a lot of these national headlines that I had mentioned earlier. So, like I said, tonight's podcast is really when the rubber hits the road. I'm not sure I'm going to have a lot of answers for you. As a matter of fact, let me just say here that, being a mental health professional or expert, it doesn't mean that I'm the expert or we're the expert on your situation. We don't live with you. We don't know all the details about your life. So it's impossible for us to have the answers for you to be the end all and be all for any person. But this podcast and the work that we do behind the scenes of this podcast, we know that we are part of the solution and we want to continue to be that. With that said, that's why we're doing this podcast tonight. And so there's some things I want to talk about in terms of, I can't take one more thing. And I mentioned some of that already. So here we go, right? One of the things I want to talk about tonight and, that I want to provide support is, looking at, kids who don't want to go to school. I mean, I told my husband this past week, I said, I can't take another week when Liz decides not to go to school. And I said to her, Liz, you're only 13, right? I know that. Like, Liz, every week for the past month, you have not wanted to go to school. And in fairness, we know what's going on with Liz at school. We know about her teachers. We know about what's happening with one or two in particular of her teachers. And it's like kids are having, I mean, teachers, let me just back up. Teachers are having a hard time in the classroom too. Did I skip them? I should not have done that. I mean, teachers, they themselves are having their own mental health issues. They're coming in the classroom. I mean, let's face it, who wants to teach nowadays when they're exposed to possibly being shot in a classroom or being shot while they're going to work? And so kids are having teachers who, number one, they don't want to be there, right? Because number one, they're afraid. Number two, they're not getting paid enough. That's a whole nother separate topic. And so kids have to go into a classroom with people who really don't want to see them or be around them anyway. And that's unfortunate. And I have to tell you, so here's the thing. I can't take one more thing. So you should start saying that with me. Here's the thing, right? Sometimes I feel guilty. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like, what's my option? I'm pretty certain that there are a lot of parents out there feel like, what is my option? I don't want to send my kid into this environment, but I have to go to work, right? What are you going to do? Right? Now, there's some other options out there. For example, I have an older teen. We allowed her to do online schooling, but I have to admit, it's not always the best fit for all students. I mean, I have to say that on a larger scale, a lot of students really need to be, in a more socialized environment. They need to be with other peers. Now, that's a whole nother issue again. I can't take one more thing because when you're around peers, then you have your peers that are bullying you. That's another, what should I say, crisis in this country. Bullying is at an all-time high in middle school. That's where it's most prevalent is in middle school. Not to say it doesn't happen in high school, but middle school. And so kids are not wanting to go to school because of either bullying, teachers who are bullying them, because that's what it's come down to. So what do we do as parents? And again, and we as parents, we're facing our own, perhaps employment issues. If you listen to the topic last week, women with tears, women oppressing women, women oppressing women in the workplace. So you can just see, right? I'm really trying to, give a framework. You can see how we have a lot of social conditions that are out of control. That's why I'm spending time here. A lot of conditions, social conditions that are out of control. So, where does that leave us? Where does that leave us? That leaves us really being distressed. And it really, has us, it really has us facing a lot of vulnerabilities. These social conditions, they really bring about these vulnerabilities. I don't know where you are in that. So and then you have parents who are new parents. I don't know, how are you doing out there, new parents? I've been talking to quite a few new moms, and their transition into motherhood. That's a very vulnerable time. Once again, talking about vulnerabilities, you know. Um, and so social conditions then really, really creates an environment or environments where we're really pushed beyond, some of us or a lot of us beyond, our emotional capacity. And it really causes us then to have what? Oh my gosh, all these, weird types of what we call, symptoms and disorders. It's no wonder then we have a national mental health crisis in this country. There we go. I think I summed it all up. This is why I think this topic is so important. I mean, there's room to really talk about a lot of the things that I mentioned, but there are a few things I want to kind of hone in on, right? I don't know, what have I said so far that perhaps you're saying, I'm there. Maybe you're the mom that, like me, you have a kid that just doesn't want to go to school. And here's the part I said earlier. You might be feeling some sense of guilt. And I'll be honest on this podcast. There are a few times I did not bother my daughter. I let her stay home. I did. And you know what? Sometimes that is the answer. It is the answer, you know? Um, so I don't know. Are you the mom that's new? You're a new mom? I don't know. Being a new mom is hard. Being a new mom with all these existing social conditions, and you're trying to, raise kids, or you're a new mom again, and you have, perhaps older children that you're caring for. How do you juggle that? How do you meet the needs of this newborn and this older child with school issues and also taking care of yourself? Those are some strong things to have to work through. And then where are the supports when everyone else is pretty much, embattled with their own problems and their situations, right? So you can easily see how this topic of I can't take one more thing, or maybe you're the mom that's, I don't know, you have a disabled child, right? I've seen this. It's not easy. Now I'm going to pause here and say, I'm not interpreting for anyone. That's one thing I don't ever want to do in this work is interpret, a person's situation, because hey, let's just face it, it's not all bad and it's not all good. But the social conditions I'm talking about, I think we can all relate to that in some shape or form. So again, maybe you're a mom with you're with an adult disabled child and you have to work. Yeah. And you have the disabled child at home that you still have to find or provide care for. I cannot imagine. And then you have to deal with, and God bless you if you're a teacher having to deal with that. Oh my gosh, right? Once again, I can't take one more thing. So, what are we going to do with all of that? Well, let's take a break here and I'm going to play some more lively music. So, I kind of, gave overview as to, what this podcast is about. It's looking at basically social conditions in current time, in this now time, and how it's showing up. And when we get back, I want to kind of look at specificity to, you know maybe you're the one that you have a kid at home that doesn't want to go to school, and you're probably feeling some sense of guilt like I have, and you're probably saying, I wasn't raised like that. And I did say that this week. I did, like, you got to go to school. We used to have to go to school whether we liked it or not, whether it was snowing, raining, it didn't matter. You had to go to school. And now I'm parenting and I'm doing it differently. Look at the social conditions that we have going on. I have empathy for my daughter. I mean, and it's a fine line, and it's not one that is easy to discern, you know. But I think that we really have to pay attention to what's happening in the present moment, and you do the best that you can. So we're going to pause here. When we get back, we're going to look more closely at perhaps touch on some of the points I mentioned earlier or the conditions earlier, not the points, but the conditions like, maybe you have a kid at home that you're having a hard time. Maybe you have a hard time managing your own emotions, which is why you can't help to properly manage your kids' emotions. Well, that can be a problem. We're going to take a look at that. Also, we're going to take a look at, mass shootings. I mean, schools get ready to get out. Last week of school is coming up, and a lot of kids probably won't go to school because they're actually fearing that. I mean, I'll be honest. Yeah, that's our lived experiences now. We're going to take a look at that too, and we're also going to look at ways how to continue to manage our own emotions as parents, some action steps that we can take to help to manage our own emotions and how to be realistic in the face of these conditions that's now forced upon us. So yeah, we're gonna take a break. There's a new song I want to introduce you to, and I've been playing it a lot this week. It's by Jacqueline Carr. It says, "I believe God." And it's interesting. When I was playing that song, I'm trying to take a break and I'm still talking. I'll tell you what, I will take the break. And I will play the song right now. We'll talk more about the song because every time I do a podcast, I try to do introduce new music. I think music that is really appropriate for the topic or for the current mood, and I think this one is really appropriate. So here we go. Oh, my phone just shut off on me. Don't do that. Here we go. Jacqueline Carr, I believe God. I stumbled upon the song because I listen to, contemporary Christian music and just contemporary music. And this week, this one just popped up in my, what do you call that subscription with Apple, my Apple subscription. I'm sorry if you heard my cord going out. Sorry about that. But it just started playing and I'm like, it's really soothing. I even shared it with my sister-in-law. So I'm going to share it with you tonight. Let's see what you think. That song is hard to accept. It is because, things okay, I'm gonna ask you a question, right? How many have you prayed for something and it didn't happen? The reverse happened. Okay. I think that's all of us. That includes me. And that song is hard for me to say. Like again, I stumbled upon this song this week and I was like, wow, that song really touched my heart. And I'm not gonna lie, I can't, right? I'm not gonna tell you that. I'm like one of the stanzas says, he still wants us to believe, and I'm like, that's hard sometimes. I mean, listen to the things that we're talking about tonight, and it really, for some of us, and even outside of the things that we talked about tonight, I have no doubt that, persons listening to this podcast, they have their own set of traumas, whether it's social conditions or environmental conditions, people, and you're saying, where's God? That's a tough one, Um, which brings me to talk about. So this song, I love this song, and this song is a challenge for me sometimes in my humanity because I know that as a human being, we have these vulnerabilities, and that's what I want to talk about next, right? So vulnerabilities. If I'm not sure if you saw my talk this week, maybe you saw maybe you saw this picture I posted on Instagram. And I was working out. It was Monday, I think. Yeah, and when I'm doing a 1 day power tip, whenever I digress, it means that I'm having a good time. It means that I'm kind of easing my way and I'm really feeling, I'm feeling what I'm talking about. I wish you could see me. Matter of fact, just to let you know, I'm going to start videotaping the podcast. I'm waiting for this video camera to come because people are asking me to do it. And I'm like, I'm nervous about that. But I'm going to try. I'm going to try to start, videoing the podcast. So not only can you hear me, but you can see me and my antics and, you know, what I do. So I'm going to work on that. But so, yeah, I have a hard time sometimes with the song, and in the work that I do, one of the things I don't skip is I don't skip, and you hear me say this from time to time, you're going to always hear me say it because, part of our constitution is our spirituality, our spiritual makeup, that part of us that nobody sees, that inner, I call it the black box inside. But I always ask about people's religious and their spiritual background. Why do I ask that? Because, there is a higher consciousness above our unconsciousness, the higher self. That's why I always say, your better self, because each of us have a better version to what we have. And the only way to get to that is through your spiritual, access or your spiritual expression and development. And and so we're talking about vulnerabilities. And again, I think I mentioned this in the last podcast, is that research still shows that one of the most important skill, right, or ways to buffer vulnerabilities is having a cultivated spiritual life. It's still that is still like one of the number one ways of buffering vulnerabilities. You know, buffering those answers that we don't get to prayer. Buffering those situations that those conditions that I mentioned earlier. And so I find that I don't know. And lately, I'm seeing this trend again, where when I ask these questions in therapy, by now, persons are beginning to get warm, to the idea of the questions I'm asking. And if you're a therapist out there listening to this podcast, you would agree that, and if you're asking these questions, that, doing a spiritual assessment is such a big deal, because that's where I get to find out that there's so much hurt there. There's so much trauma. And I'm going to do a podcast on that, spiritual trauma, generational spiritual trauma. I'm going to do one on that. I'm not going to do it until perhaps towards the end of the summer. So yeah. And by the way, in 2 weeks, I will not be here. I'll be out of the country for a couple of weeks. I'm actually going to go to Italy for the first time. And I'm so thankful for my family supporting this, allowing me to go. But yeah, I'm not going to do it when I get back, but I'm going to do it sometime over the summer. And it's a really important topic. It ties into everything that, I talk about and that that we work on. And so I can't see why this topic is not even discussed already. So we're going to do that. So let's come back. So the song I just played is kind of triggering for me sometimes, because I'm like, there are things I pray about and I don't get answers to for years, right? How about you? There are things that are happening in our lives, like, we have existential vulnerabilities. So what is existential, right? It's the things that we can't control. It's existential. It's outside of us. We have no choice. We have no choice. You know what I mean? It's when you've eaten well, when you run and you do everything well, and you hear this person has a brain tumor, or they have cancer, or they have this or that. That's existential. You know, I had, possible that I had thyroid cancer. That's definitely existential, okay? Because I'm a health nut, run hey, it had nothing to do with that. I had abnormal thyroid that was really, really kicking my butt. You know what I mean? And so that takes me over into all the other topics I've talked about. So let's look at some other, vulnerabilities that we're exposed to on a today basis now that has become a norm in this country. Mass shootings. Oh my God, I can't take one more thing. Every time I hear the news, I'm like, I can't take one more. I just can't. How about you? Right? It is said that 4 months into the year in this country, and there was already over 130 mass shootings in this country. And this number is compared to other wealthy countries. It is said that America has the fewer restrictions on gun ownership, and honestly, they have fewer consequences on them too. And that's what I'm noticing. And it had me thinking about, like, I'm from Jamaica, right? We don't have a lot of gun violence in Jamaica like that. We don't, and it's a poor country. I mean, crime is high, but mass shootings, we just don't have that. And I was looking around in other countries too. I mean, Canada is not a third world country, it's a developed country, and they have more gun restrictions. They have a different way of approaching the situation. But in America, where it's an affluent country, poverty certainly is here, but not compared to third world, and underdeveloped countries. And there's some, do you see any mass shootings in Haiti? No, you don't. Do you see mass shootings in like other, Latin countries, in Venezuela? No, you don't. And they had a very, big crisis the other day. And still have a crisis going on. Look in Peru. There's a big upheaval over there. Do you hear about mass shootings? Even in Sudan, they have this war going on. Do you see mass shootings in Sudan? You don't. Okay, so to be fair, some of the stuff is not, publicized, but this country, to a large degree, has the most mass shootings in the entire world. So that leaves us very, very, very vulnerable. There are times, I'll be honest, I don't like the movies, but I don't even go to the movies because I have this fear that they're going to do what they do in a movie theater. My kids want to go, my husband, and I'm like, I don't want to go. You know what I'm saying? So it's like these are existential vulnerabilities. We don't it's like there's a way to have control and that's not being attended to, right? And then you have to worry about, other vulnerabilities. Then you have financial vulnerabilities. Look at what's going on with in Congress right now. I saw in the news today that they're approaching some kind of agreement into the weekend. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. So here it is. The headlines are now telling us where they are. And I'm sure this is creating more hysteria for a lot of people. I mean, there are a lot of people who are not working right now. They've lost their insurance. They can't come to therapy. I'm already hearing those things because I'm getting calls about that. So we have these vulnerabilities again that's popping up. So now you have existential vulnerabilities, things that we don't have control over, but things that we actually could have control over, nothing is being done about them. So that's pushing us further and further and further into mental health crisis in this country, which we're pretty much at the tipping point, if you will. What else? Oh, and before I move on from that, I was looking around. I think it's pretty obvious when it comes on to mass shootings. I mean, who's committing mass shootings? Male, white persons that these male and white males that have law enforcement or military backgrounds and have a sketchy sketchy psych background. This is the profile of the persons that are committing these crimes in this country. And more times than not, they're apprehended and nothing else happens. So again, where there's control, then it seems like the hands are off, so to speak. And then we're left to deal with these vulnerabilities, emotional distress, anxiety, distress, all kinds of things. And then here we go again. Where is God? And is he not going to answer our prayers? Is he not listening to us? What can we do? All right. And, you know, it's no wonder then. Well, I tell you what, I don't want to go to work if I know that perhaps, I'm going to be shot up. Who wants? So it's like now we are like constantly living in fear. And so it's no wonder again why depression and anxiety is on, at all time high. I want to share some stats with you. And now it's funny that we're doing this topic this evening because one of my colleagues wrote me this evening, and this is what she said to me. I couldn't believe it. This is what she said. I'm going to read it to you. This is what she said to me. So let me give a background to why she sent me this, and she actually encouraged me to make sure I'm spreading the word about this. So a group of us in Palm Beach County, so we are clinicians of color, and so we started this group called Black Therapists Palm Beach County, and we started this back in 2019, right before COVID hit. Am I right? I think so. Yeah, right before COVID hit. There are a few of us, a handful of us, that are in private practice in Palm Beach County. Matter of fact, I want to take a few minutes now just to give a shout out to my colleagues, Dr. Heidi McFarland from Life Skills, Rodita Masadou from Restore Wellness, Alexis Highsmith from Healing Expressions, Mark and Volmy from Bedrock Counseling. Did I miss anybody? I think that's the crew. So we meet every other month, and yesterday was such a I don't know, there was such synergy among us yesterday. And one of the things that keeps coming up in our conversation is that this group is not really well known yet. We've been around since, and it's a nonprofit. We are a nonprofit. Pardon, I want to share that. So, Black Therapists Palm Beach County is a non-for-profit organization, and basically our mission is to provide emotional support to each other as clinicians. Right? That's our first goal, is to provide emotional support and education to each other. Because I'm telling you, this group that we are filled with expert clinicians in Palm Beach County. I'm so proud of this group. And so we've been meeting now for the past, what should I say, 3 years? Yeah, 3 years. And we started out really small. We have a lot more people in the group, but not as active as the names that I just mentioned. Sometimes when you're growing, something, you have the few, I call the cluster, the core, and now the persons I just mentioned, we've been together from the very beginning. And so in our meeting yesterday, it was, Mark and Vomi said, one of the things I love about this group is that we can be there for each other as clinicians, because looking at the mental health crisis, and this is May, Mental Health Month, he said, he says, I'm seeing clients, you guys are seeing clients, and who is seeing us? Who's being there for us? And he's right. He's right. If we're not careful trying to, meet the needs of clients, which we do, and we love doing that because there is a crisis in this country. But he's saying, if, we have to be careful not to hit burnout and that we're taking care of ourselves, because if not, then we're going to be a part of the statistics that we're reading now and that we're talking about and that we're seeing on our couches in our offices. So then this afternoon, Dr. McFarlane, Heidi McFarlane, she didn't know that I was, maybe she knew, she probably saw my post about the podcast I'm doing this evening. But she says, you know what, Keisha, don't forget to find a way to talk about Black therapists, Palm Beach County, and let other clinicians know, and even people in the community know about our group. I said, you know what? I never thought about that. Shame on me. I did not. I'm being honest, right? So this is what she wrote to me. This is what I want. And she didn't know the topic per se. She didn't know what we're going to talk about this evening. So this is what she said. I have to read. And I said to her, Dr. McFarlane, thank you. She says, Hi, Keisha, great meeting yesterday. Not sure what platform, but I was thinking that what way can we send out a public announcement to market or publicize about the group? According to the CDC, in 2020, suicide was a third leading cause of death, respectively, for Blacks or African Americans ages 15 to 24. The history of the Black experience has been characterized by trauma and violence, which impacts our future emotional and mental health. And she said, teamwork makes the dream work. Mental health is not an individual problem. It takes a village to tackle the problems of emotional distress. We are that village of mental health support for each other and the community. Share and empower each other with practice resources and updates on community involvements and events. And she says, let me know your thoughts and what everyone else thinks, Heidi, Dr. McFarlane. And I said to myself, now, look at God, right? Now, some person might say, look at the universe. I say God, it's my language. And I'm like, she did not even know. So, that just lets me know that what we're talking about tonight is really important. Really important. I'm going to pause here. Remember, we check in with each other. Maybe now is a good time for you to do some breath work, because when we come back from this pause, I want to read to you some stats on girls, which is why, and these are newer stats coming out of the CDC, right? These are newer stats. Share this podcast with someone, because information, not only I'm going to share the stats about what's going on with girls right now, especially teen girls and girls in college, but the next thing I want to share about that is about our upcoming, teen summer support group. And I also want to share with you, what we're doing about, these social conditions, our part, as one of the solutions to what is happening, not only with girls, but also working with women, because again, stats show how a girl really is impacted by her mother. Okay. So not just the dad, even though, we really try to, like, we beat the horse on that. But, the way how moms present themselves and how they live, the girls are watching. It's a big deal. So we're going to pause here. We're going to play some fun music. It's been a heavy podcast, but we got to talk about these things. And again, thanks to Dr. McFarlane from Life Skills, who sent me that email this afternoon. It was right on time. She didn't even know it. I'm going to play, I like the song. Chandler Moore, I play him from time to time. I'm going to lean on you. So here's some stats, okay? We're talking about mass shootings. It says that 91% of perpetrators were born in this country, in the country that they attacked. Or so we're speaking about the United States. 99% were male, 1/3 had military experience, and 7% had a history of law enforcement experience. Okay. So this is what the research is showing over and over and over again. This is like what we call reliable, right? Because it keeps popping up that way. It hasn't changed. It hasn't, right? And then how about some stats on girls? Now, it's interesting. This is post-COVID, okay? This is post-COVID. The research that's coming out on girls. This is what's being said. It says, I want to make sure I read this accurately. It says post-COVID, it says that 70% right? 70% of girls said that they were very much, quote unquote, missed seeing people during the pandemic. And when they came back, that they were happy to return back to their environment. And only 28% of boys reported that sentiment, or that they actually um, and I'm really kind of skeptical about the 28% of boys reporting that. And I'm going to tell you why I say that, right? Because culturally, boys are socialized not to say how they feel. This is truth. And yes, I'm bringing curiosity to this thought, right? How is it that only 28% of boys report that sentiment? Now, here's what I'm thinking. Who are the interviewers? Who's interviewing these boys? And then you think about the statistics about the mass shooters, right? So 70% of girls post COVID said they were happy to be back and they miss seeing other people, compared to 28% of boys reporting that sentiment. This is why I like research so much, because so the people who are committing mass shootings are mostly males. 91% of the perpetrators are males. Now, if you look at this research thing, only 28% of boys report sentiment that they actually missed being in a social environment. And it makes me wonder how true that is, of these boys reporting that. But boys have been socialized not to be emotional. Don't emotion. They were taught not to emotionalize anything. But but they grow up to be men that become mass shooters. I mean, I'm saying, is anybody looking at that? How is it white men in this country are so angry? Why is it they're so angry? Why is there such what's the word? Magnification on guns, which is fine. You can own a gun, that's fine. I mean, there are other countries that men own guns, but they're not going around shooting up places. So is it the fact that it's about gun control, or is it about that men are not socialized to really deal properly with their emotional well-being? This is what I'm going after. Nobody's talking about that, but I guarantee you, gender expression, men are not allowed to cry, but men are allowed to use guns. This is interesting. How is it men are allowed to use guns, and, but men are not allowed to express their feelings, or men are not allowed to have diversified roles at home to help their wives and to help their daughters, to be, to have a proper self-esteem, so they can actually be strong, women in society, so they can live productive lives. So I see these discrepancies, and these are some of the social conditions I'm talking about that end up manifesting, over time, in violence. Violence at home, violence in the workplace, violence in society, right? Because men are not socialized to feel. They're not socialized to empathize with other people, or with, their emotions to their daughters, or to other women. They're allowed to be tough and rough and all of those things, but they're not allowed to deal with the emotions that they actually have within them. So what do they do? They show that through shooting up people. So again, society has these norms where men are normalized to be one way and girls are normalized to be a certain way. But who's really hurting here? We're all hurting. So I think we need to take a look also at the vulnerabilities that men are facing and nobody's looking at. So I know I snuck that one in there. I have to, because if I'm going to talk about vulnerabilities, we have to include men. I mean, I know this is a podcast about women, but how can we exclude men from our talks when they very much need to be included in our talks? I mean, they're affecting all fabrics, the fabric of our society today. I mean, the elements are fabrics, I was trying to say. And so that's important. So now that takes me into, so what can we do, right? Again, I mentioned different social conditions. I didn't go into all of them, but I tried to really stay on top of the ones that we're really facing today. Working with our teens. Mental health with our teens. Mass shooting that's affecting mental health of our teens. That's affecting our teachers. I mean, that's affecting everything. So I tried to kind of stay focused on those topics, those broader topics, because by doing so, I believe we can get to the smaller topics, if you will. I hate to call it smaller, but more manageable topics, if you will, in our day to day living. So, what can we do? School year is coming to an end. the school year is coming to an end. And you know what? When the school year begins again, I'm going to reintroduce this piece that I'm about to talk about. Is how can parents help to including myself? Remember, this goes from first. What? So there are like five bullet points I want to kind of go over very quickly here. And you might, if you're listening tonight, I know my mic is kind of short. I'm not sure what's going on with my mic. Can you hear me? I hope so. Um, One of the things I need to look into for the next school year, and I'm gonna sit down with my daughter too, is to understand, your school's precautionary measures. Now, I have to say one thing about Liz's school: we get calls all the time about, what's happening, what has happened, or any kind of security measures that they're changing or putting into place. That's one thing I can say. They do call. We get lots of calls about that. And I'm thinking more too. I perhaps need to get more involved. Maybe because I used to be on my daughter's PTA, Parent Teachers Association. I used to be more involved in a lot of things, but she's gotten older. I've kind of backed off a little bit. But I used to get involved in a PTA, so I used to learn a whole lot more. And this is something that you can do, and I know that's very taxing for us. But this is the climate that we're in, and so perhaps understanding your school's posture measures is really important as a parent, so you can be involved with your child to say, hey, this is what we know to be the case. So if something were to happen, this is what we can expect to do. And this is tough. This is tough for me too. But, we got to talk to our children about school shootings and violence, and the way to do that, there are different ways. Maybe I'll spend time in the next podcast talking about ways to talk to your child about school shootings and violence, but I know we do it at home too, you know. We talk to our children, but not talking about it, really what I'm getting at, but not by not talking about it, you actually create more fears and anxieties for yourself and for your children. I mean, you start having this thinking style of catastrophizing. You start thinking the worst, and we don't want to have that kind of thinking style. We don't want to have that kind of thinking style. So by being able to talk about it will diminish fear significantly. And again, understanding your school's precautionary measures will help you to have a realistic way about how to talk to your child and to have a plan in place should something happen. Focus on positive school experiences. Hopefully you have a few of those. With my daughter this year, it's been kind of sucky. It's a good thing I have her in soccer. Soccer, extracurricular activities is really important to do. Extracurricular activities is really important to have your kids involved in, because that's also a stress reducer for you and for them. And it gives them a different perspective in the midst of these vulnerabilities that that's forced upon us again now, having become existential because, it's something that we don't have control over seemingly. Here's something that I think is really huge. A lot of us don't do that, especially after COVID. I mean, some of us have seemed to lost our connection with families. We just don't have this quality connection anymore. But if you still have it, talk to your friends and families about your feelings. I mean, maybe, when you have, I have a great neighbor, Michelle. She's always inviting us over. Let's have pizza. And it's nice to have that kind of relationship. Rebuild your community relationships. That's so important. Maybe you go to church. Maybe, you guys have Bible studies, or maybe you have youth nights and things like that. Maybe these are things that should be talked about, and not just pray about them, but take action around them. Because it's important to pray. That's one way of cultivating this higher consciousness beyond the unconsciousness, right? So maybe talking to your neighbors, talking to people at your church. That's the thing. We don't talk to each other anymore, but that's one of the ways to help to reduce and diminish fear, anxiety, and stress around this topic and around this real, this lived experience that we're having to live each day in this country. And keep up with your own wellness. Often on this podcast, we talk about, mindfulness. And it's important to take care of your own well-being. As parents, that may mean, physical exercise. That may mean, taking time outside the house, outside of your own children, taking a break from your day-to-day activities. And really what mindfulness is, that it's being present. Mindfulness is being present with what you're working with, facing and, dealing with those heavy emotions that come, but doing it in a way that you're not pushing it away, because pushing away, all that does is have it to build over time. And then you end up having anxiety and depression in the worst way possible. And so mindfulness is being able to take care of yourself. If you're having a difficult emotion, feel that emotion. Take a walk. It'll leave. Feel that emotion, cry. Feel that emotion, maybe lift some weights, I don't know. But being present, right, is being present with our emotion. We call that distress tolerance, is being able to handle the distress in a healthy fashion. So your well-being is important. What else I want to say in these last few moments? Teaching your kids to recognize their feelings. Learning to recognize and label feelings doesn't come automatically for many of us, especially if from the Caribbean. Oh, why you crying? It's just not important. We're very stoic people, and I'm pretty sure you probably in your culture you can relate too. But some of the ways that you can, learn to appreciate, maybe, hugging your kids, playing a board game. I mean, we've in our home, we're kind of past that in a sense. We like to watch movies together. But talking with your kids, my husband, he's great at that. He's always roughhousing with the girls. It helps to create bond, it helps to reduce anxiety. And by playing around and just being silly, you know what it does? It allows them to open up and talk about these other things that they're carrying on the inside that you typically wouldn't hear about. Because if you come straight and ask them, "So how was your day?" They're not going to tell you anything. Psh, it's just not happening. But the moment you decide to probably kick the soccer ball outside around, like my husband does with my daughter, or after a soccer game, soccer season is over now, but this is a good time. We build conversations around these fun times, and we get to learn about, what her teacher, I was about to call her teacher's name, um, but what her teacher said or did, or, something like that. So that's a good way of helping our kids to open up about what they're feeling, learn how to talk about, especially your boys. If you have boys, so we have girls at home. Our son, he's in Jacksonville, but boys, moms and dads, it's okay for boys to learn how to open up and talk about how they feel. They have feelings just like girls. I'm telling you right now. And we want them to grow up to be able to talk about how they feel and not stuff their feelings, because it's going to show up in a way that is unhealthy, and it's going to show up at a very inconvenient time. Another two last points. More emphasis on, again, social supports. I mentioned this, kind of in an indirect way, but what does that look like? I don't know. For you, it could be, visiting, Aunt Sue up in Jacksonville, or I don't know, do a car ride, go visit a family member, build more community again in families. That's so important. And, support one another. Nowadays kids are so big on competing with each other, who has the newest phone or shoes, and we've become so commercialized and such consumers that that's all these kids talk about. But these kids are learning it from somewhere. I mean, social media is another thing. My kids roll their eyes over when I say, put the phone down. Or there was a time in our home when we said no phone on a Sunday, and that was like war in here. But now my teens are telling me, "Mom, I'm so glad you did that, because it did help," especially my daughter, Kyra. She says, "Mom, it did help me because sometimes I was spending way too much time." So parents, it's okay to set a boundary with your kids too, and, reducing social media, because even now that's up in arms and about how social media is deteriorating our kids' mental health. And it is true. It is very true. And celebrate your kids, celebrate your kids when they achieve something that they've worked hard for, or even when something that they didn't achieve and something didn't go right, but you acknowledge their efforts. That's so important. It's helping to build their self esteem. And again, building resilience in the face of these vulnerabilities that we are constantly going to have to face. And so I can't take one more thing, but I want to close by saying there are ways to handle them, because they're going to keep coming, guys. They're going to keep coming. And so this podcast, and I did bare my soul tonight, talking about some of the vulnerabilities that I face at home as a mom, with teen girls in middle school and high school. That's not easy stuff. And I try to be relatable to you, perhaps in terms of, maybe it's in, reflecting some of the work that I do professionally, but also hoping that I connected with you in terms of maybe that one more thing that perhaps blew your stack this week, or maybe that one more thing that will come that could potentially derail you. But I hope tonight that we connected in a way that you found hope in this conversation, that you found a connection, and you found tips. So, anyway, we're just going to give ourselves a round of applause for this topic tonight. Yay! So let's pause. I was gonna play some music, but we're almost out of time. I don't want to go past 8:30, so I'm gonna take a few minutes here, just to kind of give you some quick updates. I want to say thank you to those who have. I don't know, you guys are really working this book out, Healing of the Heart. Oh my gosh, great feedback. A couple Amazon reviews, and it's really doing well. And I just want to thank you for supporting this work, of women and girls. And it's just very encouraging for me. I've been using this book in the practice even before I published this book. I've been using some of the poetry and prose in the work that I do, and now it's public, and women are using this prose and poetry, workbook, Healing of the Heart. And I don't know, I'm overjoyed really from, the feedback. I even got a feedback today from someone very dear to me in the NBHI community. She knows who she is if she's listening tonight. Thank you so much for that feedback. And as I always say to others, just pay it forward, tell someone about the book, give someone a book, so they can, help to change how they're feeling about themselves and how they view themselves. They can live, better and productive lives and really just change, the trajectory of their relationship. So wanted to just give, a big thank you for that. What else? The teen support group. So that's coming up June 10th through July 29th. We right now we have early tickets on sale. I think there's a 20% off. You can go ahead to eventbrite.com and look for New Beginning Healing Institute. So we have those tickets available. I'm really excited about that. And again, trying to be part of the solution, just a small part of the solution, working with our women and girls in our community, helping to address the mental health crisis. So yeah, go ahead and take advantage of that. And last but not least, our Women's Connection Collective. So this group is a really special group. At first, this group was really about, women who have worked with us, perhaps who have gone through one of our groups, or maybe have gone through family therapy, or maybe even individual therapy. And, we're trying to form a different community for women who have done the work in their lives, and they want to build more positive and healthy relationships with other women. And so we formed this group. What we're finding is that it's the engagement has been low, and I'm getting feedback that perhaps I should open this group up to other women. So I'm officially saying it here on this podcast, that I'm going to open the group up. I'm going to change the languaging a little bit in terms of who can join the group. And so I'm going to do that over the weekend, the rest of this weekend, and I'm going to open that up to anyone perhaps who may want to join this group. And this group is run strictly by donations. We do not charge for this group. And I have to tell you, I am amazed at the women that donate to this group. Honestly, I'm like, whoa. I mean, because we don't set up, I think we set like $1 to $5, and it's like people are just donating to this group. So there's a community budding here, and we want you to be a part of it. If you're listening to this podcast, you're part of the NBHI community, you're part of Healing of the Heart, definitely share with other persons this information about the Women's Connection Collective. It's a psychoeducational group, it's a fun group, it's a skills building group. You get to meet different women, different backgrounds, different passions, interests, and hobbies and skills. And I think it's amazing. Honestly, we've met a couple times. Man, there's so much potential here. And so if you're listening to this podcast, share it. We have different venues. The last time we met at Lake Worth Beach, and today we should have had a meeting. It didn't happen. Low engagement. We were going to meet in Royal Palm. So once again, share this group. There's also a Facebook group associated with it. Once you sign up, you get into the Facebook group. You get all the paperwork, all the homework, and you get a copy of every venue that we'll be meeting for the rest of the year. So that's all my updates. And I thank you for being with me on episode number 15. I can't take one more thing. We're going to rock out. It's 8:28. And let's see what we can rock out with. Let's see. I'm going to play something fun. Um, let's see. I always have a hard time choosing. So let me go to my playlist, and we're going to play something fun. Let's see here. I always have a hard time choosing, guys. I am going to play something fun, I promise.